Hello. Right. Wow. This is the first time I've ever tried to go live on YouTube, so this is quite exciting. I'm used to going live on my Twitch stream, obviously, but I want to do a little bit more on YouTube, and thought I might as well give this going live thing a go. Um, we'll see how it goes. Actually, not sure if anyone will come in, but you know what? That's okay. It's like my Twitch streams, you can always catch it on VOD. So, um, I don't have all the technical wizardry that other YouTube streamers may have. This is just basically me talking to you, trying to not tell you what to do, but trying to make suggestions that will help you decide what's best for you to do, because that's my raison d'etre. I am totally passionate about enabling people to take the right decisions for them when it comes to their life, their health, their well-being. Um, and that's whether it's to do with, a job, a relationship, or managing a health issue. So the title of this one, I think, makes it very clear what I'm going to be talking about. I'm talking about COVID, which is still around. And if you're in the UK, you've probably noticed that our COVID figures have gone up in the wake of the Jubilee. Um, Fortunately, the number of people being admitted to hospital because of COVID is massively down. Deaths from COVID are also massively down. But if you get a COVID infection, as I had I tested positive back at the end of April, you still have health issues. You still need to look after yourself while you are infectious. You still need to take sensible precautions to avoid passing the virus on to anybody else, just as you would do. If you've got a cold or got the flu, you are cautious about, giving everybody hugs and kisses, or you should be. Maybe we will be even more cautious in future. I have to say, I hope so. The thing is, although I'm talking about colds and flu, and most of the symptoms of COVID make it feel as if it's a normal cold or flu virus. We originally thought of it as a respiratory infection because people had difficulty breathing, they needed to go onto ventilators. Actually, COVID affects the whole body. We know this. And this is why there is this thing called long COVID, which I think is actually going to become a bigger issue. I'm going to talk a little bit about flu, because this is the respiratory virus that most people were more familiar with before we ever heard of COVID. If you've ever had flu, you were probably given the same advice I was when I had flu. You're going to feel rough for a couple of weeks, and it will be about a month before you feel fully recovered, because it takes a drain on the whole body. If only COVID were like that. For some people, it is. For some people, they test positive, they don't get any symptoms. At the other extreme, there are people who, when they test positive, they are severely ill. And for lots of people, the negative test, which you hope comes after about 2 weeks, isn't the end of the story. Because when your body's been affected by an infection, whether it's the flu virus, the COVID virus, your body takes time to recover. Now, in the case of flu, because flu is primarily a respiratory virus, the effects are more localized. COVID gets everywhere. That's why during the very first wave, way back in early 2020, they were discovering lots of strange symptoms like loss of taste and smell, COVID toes, abdominal issues. In fact, loss of taste and smell was, in the end, if you've got loss of taste and smell, almost by definition, you had COVID. And the very, very famous, at least here in the UK, and I assume all over the world, um, trifecta of high temperature, um, coughing, and breathlessness. Actually, I a high temperature scanning temperature when people go in doesn't actually protect anybody because with the newer variants of COVID, you don't really get a temperature. You can have COVID and not have a high temperature. And I mention this because this shows how COVID actually affects our bodies in very different ways to the flu. Now, if you've just recently tested positive for COVID, look after yourself. You may be one of the lucky ones with no symptoms, and all you're really trying to do is avoid passing the virus on to other people, but still look after yourself. If you are actually suffering symptoms and really feeling ill, and I came into this category, obviously you need to look after yourself. And certainly while you're still testing positive, you know, it's fairly obvious that you need to look after yourself. But there is this horrible grey area once you've tested negative, when if you work, you are probably expected to go back to work. But the bottom line is you may not be fully recovered from the infection, even if you are no longer infectious. And we now know that this issue of long COVID, where the symptoms persist for weeks and maybe even months after the initial infection, having effects on multiple body systems, is very real. One of the most common side effects that just persists and persists and persists is the extreme fatigue. And I can testify to that one. Um, of course, the fatigue that you get with COVID, if you get really bad fatigue, it is absolutely draining. But there is a grey area. If you look up the definition of long COVID, you'll find the definition can either be symptoms which persist for more beyond 12 weeks or symptoms that persist beyond 4 weeks. Now, by definition, that means there are an awful lot of people, who, 4 weeks on, they are still not fully recovered. They're still feeling tired. They could have other symptoms. But that 12-week thing means that, people might not accept that you're actually suffering from long COVID. But obviously, if you go on to be diagnosed at 12 weeks with long COVID, if that's a definition used in your country, you've still had those 8 weeks in between when you're thinking, I feel awful, I've got no energy, I've got this hoarse voice, I've got this fine tremor, I've got this dizziness, I've still got this breathlessness. All of which shows that if you test positive for COVID, you need to be thinking immediately about, okay, I need to dedicate some serious time to self care. Now, that self care can be a number of different things. I teach mindfulness and Tai Chi, and I run sessions online. You can see those on my Twitch channel. And they are actually a very good part of COVID orientated self care. Not only are they relaxing, but also one of the things we found out very early on in the pandemic, well, I'll say we, that the scientists found out very early in the pandemic, was the effect COVID has on the inflammatory system. That the most seriously ill people, the ones who ended up in ICU, were the ones who had underlying chronic health problems like type 2 diabetes, like heart problems, which we know have their origin in a very, very continuous low grade inflammatory response. And there's more and more information coming out that shows practices like Tai Chi and mindfulness can reduce stress markers and can reduce inflammatory markers. And they can boost your immune system. So anything that can help your immune system work better and make you generally feel better, well, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's something that's worth doing. There are other things that you might want to look at. What you eat is one, and I cannot do better than recommend the Join Zoe people. They're on Instagram, they're on YouTube. You may indeed have their app on your phone for reporting your symptoms. And their work on nutrition, I have been following it for about 6 or 7 years now. Their work on nutrition is absolutely brilliant and it is science based. So, if you're looking to think, right, okay, I need to pay attention to my diet, that's where I would recommend that you go seriously look at what Zoe is saying because they're giving very good advice. But the most important thing that you can do is just recognize that, okay, I've had COVID. If you're anything like me, you kind of feel that COVID has run rampant through your body, rewritten everything in all sorts of horrible ways, scrambled it up and put it back together in a different way. Because I'm not the same person I was before I had COVID, and I know I'm not the same person I was before I had COVID. I may never go back to being the person I was before COVID. I've just got to be patient and give it time and just see what happens. But simply sitting there and thinking, right, okay, I need to take positive steps to look after my body and to look after my mind is probably the best thing you can do. And now, if you're sitting there watching this thinking, oh God, she's going to recommend meditating for 20 minutes a day or, going on retreats or sitting on a cushion and going on, and that's not me. Well, I'll let you into a secret. No, it's not me either. I've got an osteoarthritic hip, sitting cross-legged on a cushion. Not going to happen. And certainly when I was in the throes of COVID, you know, I had not got the energy to do anything. And I'm still having to pace myself a lot. But deciding that you need to take care of yourself is actually the first step. Deciding that you want to do something to help yourself look after yourself is in itself a really positive thing to do. And the other thing that I want to say is that it isn't the sort of thing that you need to spend hours and hours a day on. There are lots of simple, quick, and easy things that you can do that will help. Because in all the techniques I talk about, and I firmly believe in mindfulness, I firmly believe in Qigong, I firmly believe in all the psychological things like NLP, because I'm trained in them and I know there is science backing them. One thing I've learned is that whatever you're going to do, it's got to fit in to your life as it is now. It's got to fit into your life, your schedule, and sadly, these days, your financial constraints, which I know are very real, certainly in terms of, the diet that you're eating. I know there are an awful lot of people who are having to make difficult decisions and maybe looking at what they buy with a very limited budget in mind. And I know it's not easy. So, no, I'm not going to sit here and say, you need to eat good quality stuff and you need to go organic. Yeah, there are advantages to doing that, but not if it stresses you because you can't afford to do it. The thing is, if you can only afford to make one small change, whether you're affording it in time or affording it in money, that's a start and that's worth doing. Because so often in self care, the thing that stops us is this feeling of, I haven't got time, I'm not worth spending time over. And the simple decision to say, do you know what? I'm going to make some time. I am going to make some time, even if it's only 5 minutes a day. Or I am going to make one dietary change to maybe try and improve my diet to help me. And as I say, go to Zoe if you want hints on how to make your diet healthier. Whether it's deciding that you're going to have one vegetarian meal a week. And hint, meat is quite expensive. So actually, eating a vegetarian meal could save you money as well as being quite healthy for you. Or maybe the idea of going meat-free doesn't work for you. So maybe you just cut down the amount of meat that you have. Make it much smaller portion, which again saves you money. And you can then still make sure you're getting the calories and nutrients you need with vegetables. And just do that for one meal initially. If you're not used to doing self-care, if you're not used to having a focus as, right, okay, what can I do to look after myself? It seems impossible. It seems like a huge mountain to climb. And that's what puts a lot of people off. And what I'm here doing is saying it doesn't have to be a mountain. You don't have to change everything all at once. So if you've got COVID and you're recovering from COVID and you've realised that actually you need to do something to help yourself recover, to get back as far as you can, then simply deciding that you need to do something is a start. I cannot emphasize that enough. Simply sitting there thinking, do you know what? I think I probably should. I think I do need to do something, make some sort of change. The next decision is what sort of change you're going to make. As I say, it can be as simple as picking one meal a week and, taking whatever steps you feel are necessary, based on the Zoe advice or whatever, to say, right, okay, we're going to start changing this meal. Maybe add in one new vegetable, or maybe have lentils, I don't know. Whatever you can afford. And it's affording it in time too, because if you haven't got the time to faff around and, do a complicated recipe, well, that's not going to happen. So keep it simple. Just pick one thing. It can be as simple as, right, okay, I know that I'm really stressed about what COVID's done to me. So I probably need to do something about my stress level. So I'm going to allow myself 1 minute a day. 1 minute a day. And for that 1 minute, I'm just going to sit and focus on my breathing. And just focus on my breathing for 1 minute, because that is practicing mindfulness. And please don't tell me you can't spare 1 minute, because everyone can spare 1 minute. Having the follow-up effects of COVID is very debilitating, because you're still not feeling right. You may have had to go back to work, and you may be finding that if you're going back to your normal work activities, it's absolutely draining you, so that your social life has just died because you haven't got the energy to do anything after work. And you may be struggling in all sorts of ways, because this is not a disease that you just will inevitably shrug off. And the idea that this virus can, in some people, make almost permanent changes. I know people who've ended up with, quite severe illnesses as a result of getting a COVID infection. And that's a scary thought. I get that. Totally get that. But acknowledging that you are dealing with that sort of issue, whether it's fatigue, whether it's something different like breathlessness. My asthma is slowly starting to get back to what it was, to slightly better control than I had, but it's nowhere, it's still not as well controlled as it was before I got infected. Or if you've picked up something that you never had before, which is attributable to COVID, like I can't recommend the Zoe app enough. They go through all the possible symptoms of long COVID, and you can log them. And I've still got a bit of a persistent cough, which is due to my poorly controlled asthma. My voice is much hoarser than it used to be. If you go to some of my earlier YouTube channels or my Twitch channel, you'll discover that, go back a few months, I had a very different voice. And it's scary that this virus is doing things to you that you didn't expect. But in theory, you're cured. You're back to normal. You're able to go back to work. But in many ways, you know you're not the person you were. And that can definitely be a source of stress. So, whatever stage of your COVID journey you're on, I want to say a couple of things to you. Number one, you matter. Um, there are groups out there that can help. Obviously, I'm personally going through it, and I've got some qualifications that enable me to give you a little bit of help. Um, so feel free to contact me on here, contact me on my Patreon, contact me on my Twitch, to say, I'd like to know a little bit more about. But I think the most important thing is that if you're dealing with recovery from COVID, whether you are, 1 month post, or whether you're already starting to realize that, you are definitely sailing into long COVID territory and that the symptoms that you're living with could go on for some time, then acknowledging that a bit of help and support might be a good idea, and a bit of self care might be a good idea is quite important. And what I do is demonstrate self care techniques. I lead meditations. And if you're interested, you can contact me and say, when you do a meditation, can you focus on? I demonstrate Tai Chi, not on here, on my Twitch channel. And you can find all my most of my videos on my Patreon page. But I know that I can offer all the help in the world. I can offer all the techniques in the world. But they're not going to do any good if people don't use them. And however frustrating it might be for you to hear me say, look, your recovery is in your hands, happens to be true. You have to work within the limitations that COVID is imposing on you, whether that's fatigue or anything else. But you can recover to an extent. Most importantly, you can recover mentally. It is not nice to be faced with the prospect of thinking, okay, I'm not going to be able to go back to the life I had before COVID. I'm not going to be able to run around as much as I did. I'm going to have to pace myself. I haven't got as much energy, so I've got to make sure I use it in the right place. I'm going to have to make changes in how I do things. And that inevitably means you've got to make changes in how you think about yourself. Because if you still see yourself as being the person you were before COVID, you're going to get stressed and anxious because you're going to try and do all the things you used to do. And you're going to get annoyed and think, because I can't do them. And to a certain extent, you do need to accept you're not the person you were before you got this infection. You may go back to being that person in time, but you need to give yourself that time. And really, that's what self-care is about. Self-care is about giving yourself the time and attention that you need. And although COVID is obviously primarily a physical illness, inevitably any illness has effects on your mental health. And I firmly believe that your body and your mind completely interact. What goes on in your body can affect your mind, but equally, what goes on in your mind can affect your body. And if nothing else, the sort of techniques that I talk about can help you get your mind in order. They can help you stop getting frustrated about, the fact that things have got to change, that you can't do things the way you did. Help you accept. I'm not saying it's going to be easy and you're going to keep practicing it, but it's in your hands. I've got lots of techniques that I can give people, but I can only help people as much as they're prepared to help themselves. So I hope that talking to me verbal on today will have made you think about a few things, and maybe made you think that maybe you could do with a little bit of self-care. If you have, do feel free to check out my other videos on here. Feel free to check out my Twitch stream. All the details are in the details about my bio, about the YouTube channel. And feel free to message me to ask me any questions. In the meantime, look after yourself. Namaste.